Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today will be the typical weekend review show. I will walk through the top 10 here for the weekend of April 19th through the 21st, Easter weekend 2019. Couple new wide releases. We'll do deeper dives on Curse of La Llorona and Breakthrough. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on outside the top 10, some limited releases I want to touch upon. And then we'll talk about the juggernaut that is coming next weekend, Avengers Endgame. We'll do a little bit of mini preview on that. I might do a full-on preview show for that. We'll see. So let's dive into the top 10, see what's going on. Number one was The Curse of La Llorona. This is a Warner Brothers New Line movie. It is connected to the Conjuring universe. That was not known, I think, until South by Southwest this year. I think people were just thinking it was another kind of, smaller budget, $9 million budget here horror film, but it does actually connect into the other Conjuring movies, which includes The Nun and the Annabelle series as well. So $26.5 million for The Curse of La Llorona. It wasn't a super saturated wide release either, only in about 3,400 theaters. So its per theater average was pretty high at $7,800 per theater. This is just a big win across the board for Warner Brothers New Line, the Conjuring series. It just gets people out. The key here, though, was the Latino demographic. So if you're not familiar with what La Llorona is, I think it translates to crying women. It's an urban legend within the Latino community, especially near the border, Texas, Arizona, California, near the Mexican border. But it certainly translates throughout the country wherever there's a Latino community. So it's an urban legend about a woman who, it's actually kind of a take on, I think, on postpartum depression. Oddly enough, it's about a woman who ends up going mad and drowning her children in the river. And so she is said to haunt the rivers, and so it's a way for parents to have their kids not go near a river and drown, essentially. I think that's what it's all about. But it is a really popular urban legend within Latino communities throughout the United States. So that's why 49% of this weekend's audience was Latino, which is outrageous. The normal percentage of an audience that's Latino is about 23%. So this is one of the highest Latino percentages of an audience I've ever seen for a wide release film. So Warner Brothers really sort of hit the nail on the head with this demographic. I thought it was a really interesting idea to come out with a movie because I have a background in literature, and one of the classes that I took, I don't know if it was grad school or undergrad, was Chicana literature, and a lot of that is about local mythology. And La Llorona is just like this massive part of this sort of, I guess you would call it mythology. It's an urban legend. Like to have an example of someone, if you're not familiar with this, is like, if you ever heard this story about the escaped murderer with the hook, and the two people in a car are listening to it on the radio, and there's like a warning, and like they're making out, and then there's a scratching on the door. You probably know that story, right? And there's tons of stories like that. La Llorona is just like that, but within the Latino community. So that's why I think it's doing so well, because there's a built-in awareness here that is not really attached to a known IP. The Conjuring thing, I think, helped a little bit, but not that much. I do really think this was because that story is so popular, and a lot of people feel that it's one of those urban legends. They feel like it's a real story, and so there's just a built-in awareness and a built-in engagement, which is why I think this has done so well this weekend. So 49% of the audience was Latino. Normal would be about 23%. White people showed up at 27%. Normally they're 53%, so that's where the big shift was. African Americans were normal at about 12%. Or 11%. They do Asian and other at like 8%, which is pretty normal. What's also kind of a big story here in this performance, outside of the Latino sort of spike, is the under 25 audience. 56% was under 25. A normal movie is 33%. So, played really well essentially with the young Latino audience. And that's who's propelled this movie to this is a really fantastic number. 26.5 for this movie the weekend before Avengers is coming out. And keep in mind, this is like the fourth horror movie or third horror movie that has come out in the last month or so. Like, go back to March, we had Us come out. In the top 10, we still have Us, and we have Pet Sematary. This is third in line, and it has done so well. Let's see some other numbers. Now, quick postmortem on it, like opening week, and I love to do this. Let's talk about what the critics thought. 32% on Rotten Tomatoes, terrible. 4.6 out of 10 is their real score, awful. Audience score 59%, grain of salt, still terrible. Cinema score of a B-, not good. Horror movies are already sort of, their grades are depressed on Cinema score, usually just a half a grade. But B- isn't good. Letterboxd, who obviously have gone on about Letterboxd now, but I think it's a really good way to gauge the quality of the film. 2.3 out of 5, terrible. Compared to like Us was a 3.9 out of 5. Happy Death Day to You was a 3.1. The other sort of Conjuring movies, Annabelle was a 2.2. So it's kind of in line with Annabelle, which I don't understand. Like, I went to go see Annabelle opening weekend. This would have been like, what, October 2014 maybe? And I had a really good time. The last like 40 minutes is kind of like meh. Well, the other opening 40 minutes I thought was great, but it is not beloved at all in the horror community. And they absolutely hate the movie. That's why it has a 2.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So The Curse of the La Llorona is right in line with that. Annabelle Creation was a 3 out of 5. Conjuring was 3.8. Conjuring 2 was 3.4, and Nun was 2.2. So you can already see there's like this quality divide even within the Conjuring series, where the mainline Conjuring movies are beloved. And Annabelle Creation is kind of like an exception to that. People really like that one, but like Annabelle, The Nun, and now Curse of La Llorona are kind of just definitely second tier and seen that way. But it didn't matter because people showed up. Post-track score was 2.5 stars out of 5. Terrible, not very good at all. 48% definitely recommend. That's also low. This kind of illustrates a thing about horror movies that I think is pretty unique to the genre. They are, to some degree, especially open weekend, immune to quality problems. People showed up to this movie because they know what La Llorona is. They heard it from their parents. They heard it from their grandparents. It's like a local myth. So they already knew what it was. The marketing, I thought, was pretty effective. Didn't really reveal all that much, but sort of hyped people up to see, like, this is going to be fun and scary. And it didn't really matter that people knew it probably wasn't going to be a great movie. They just wanted to go to be scared. There's a different expectation when you go to a horror movie. It's not about whether the movie's fantastic. It's about how it makes you feel, right? How it scares you, how it unnerves you, how you go with a group and it's like scary, but like you feel safe at the same time because you're with your friends. That's what people wanted to get out of it. And I think that's probably what they're getting out of it. But we'll really see how this plays out. This is going to have a massive drop. You're looking at like, I'm calling plus 60%, especially with Avengers coming out next weekend. There's no way this thing drops below 60%. It's going to have a horror drop plus. But yeah, but at the end of the day, it's already made $26 million. Like, it's going to have a baseline. I would probably put the multiplier on this. Yikes. I don't know. 2, right around 2. So I think it's kind of like crawls its way to like 50-ish, between $50 and $60 million, I think, is a good guess on where it's going to end up domestically. And then, of course, it's going to have a major market down in Mexico. And I'm not sure how prominent the La Llorona urban legend myth is down in South America, but it could have a really strong play down there as well. In terms of, we talked a little bit about production budget was $9 million. Deadline saying the prints and advertising, I just call that marketing budget, domestically was around 35 to 40. That just puts in perspective how much it really costs to release a movie. Like a few years ago, people were saying that's a minimum $45 million to put out a wide release movie. That's a joke now. This is a tiny movie that's definitely on the lower rung of a wide release. 35-40 million bucks. Like for a major movie, it's like 60 easy. That's just to market the thing in the US and Canada. That has nothing to do with production costs. It's just crazy. This one also had, Deadline points out, they're doing this a lot more with like social media. It had a viral rate, its trailers and clips and stuff of 44 to 1, well above a typical horror movie of 25 to 1. They get those numbers from a company called Relish Mix. But I think that's an interesting sort of reason why I think it's done well. The marketing played really well. So if I do my quick postmortem, the 4 little quadrants, product quality, it sucks. It's not a good movie. I think everybody kind of knows that. But I think it doesn't really matter because it's a horror movie. Product conception, I think, was fantastic. The tie into the Conjuring thing, I don't know how deep it is. I haven't seen it, but tying it, bringing up this very prominent urban legend in a big community in the United States and massive, obviously, in Mexico, was a great idea by Warner Brothers. Really a home run on product conception. I think the marketing quality was very good. Well, I thought it was okay. I thought that the initial trailer was like, meh, they didn't really sell that much. I thought they could have done more. But what they started to do recently, and I can't remember where I kept seeing it. Maybe it was YouTube or something, where there was a clip of just the young girl in the movie in like the bathtub, and like she's just sort of like washing her face, and then there's like these hands come from behind her to like grab. I think that was really effective, like a short 5-10 second clip. So I think the product quality was decent. I didn't maybe not a home run, but like definitely like a double. And then the amount I thought was a home run. Like they really blanketed this movie everywhere, and they focused a lot on social media, which is why they were able to get this huge coverage for 35-40 million bucks. And I think it really paid off quite well for them. Let's take a look briefly at, because it is part of the Conjuring series. So whenever a movie comes out, part of a series, I like to take a broader look at the overall cinematic universe. And so this is part of a movement in horror films that probably started with Insidious, which is James Wan, back in 2011, April 1st, 2011, basically 8 years ago when Insidious came out. And that was like the arrival of a kind of a new type of horror film. It wasn't Paranormal Activity. It wasn't a found footage fad. It wasn't ironic. It wasn't like a Scream, Cabin in the Woods type of meta movie. It was kind of a throwback to like what a popular haunted house or horror movie would have been in the 80s. And so Insidious, I think it did pretty well. Domestically did 13, closed out at 54. I always kind of want to lump Insidious in with the Conjuring series, even though it's a different company. The storylines don't overlap, but Patrick Wilson's in both series. I don't know. It just feels like they're very closely related to me. So the real start of the Conjuring movie series or cinematic universe would have been The Conjuring coming out in July of 2013. That opened up at 41, closed out at 137. The Conjuring status as a classic horror film is set in stone right now. Like it in the same way that Insidious was a breath of fresh air, The Conjuring was like that, but just done at such a top shelf level. It was so polished, so tight, that it was just, it was like if Insidious was like a Toyota Corolla, the Conjuring was a Lexus, right? It was so smooth and such a great wide release movie that really it reinvigorated horror, I think, on a lot of levels. It made sort of people realize you don't have to have a gimmick. You can just make a really good, scary movie, haunted house movie, and it will work. And I think its prominence and sort of status has only gone up since it's as time goes on. So The Conjuring 41 closed out at 137. Insidious Chapter 2 came out that year too, did 40, closed out at 83. God, there's been so many Insidious movies, unbelievable. So The Conjuring comes out, does really well for a horror movie, but this is like, it's so funny like looking back, because 137 domestically for a horror movie is amazing back then. Now it's kind of a different story. After the success of It, which like opened up over $100 million opening weekend, and Split and Get Out, and now Us, like the barrier for like being a big hit in horror has moved up. Not that like making over $100 million isn't a big deal anymore. It's just not nearly as big of a deal as it used to be. But because of that performance back then, that it was amazing, 137, they decided to come out with a prequel called Annabelle, which came out in October of 2014. That opened up at 37. Great opening, closed out at 84. Not a great multiplier. Like I said before, on Letterboxd, score 2.2. It was not well regarded among the general audiences, and it's certainly not highly regarded among horror movie fans. They hate the movie. But it did well enough where they're like, well, let's keep doing this. I was really surprised that they came out with Annabelle Creation later, because I thought Annabelle would be the end of that sort of prequel. But The Conjuring 2 comes out 2 years later, June 2016, opens at 40, closes out at 102. I am not a big fan of The Conjuring 2, but other people, 3.4 on Letterboxd, so other people really seem to like it. I just thought it was really dour and muted, and I just did not enjoy the London setting whatsoever. But it did perform financially pretty darn well. Broke that $100 million magic mark for a horror movie. Annabelle Creation was a very surprising performance. That came out in the doldrums of August 2017, and like one of the worst Augusts ever, I believe. It was a terrible August that year. Nothing was doing well. Nothing was really coming out. That opened at 35 and closed out at 102, essentially matching what Conjuring 2 did. So that's where the performance of Annabelle Creation to me was really the kickoff of the Conjuring universe. Like, you had a couple side movies of the two Annabelle movies, but the fact that the side movie performed as well as the mainline sequel, that's when you know you have a strong sort of nexus and connection between these film worlds. And so I think that's probably when they greenlit The Nun, which goes back to the original Conjuring. It's connected to all these other movies. The Nun was kind of this really mysterious central figure in The Conjuring 2. That opened up last year at 53 and closed out at 117. That's the second best performing Conjuring movie in the series right now, it's a horrifically terrible film. It's basically unwatchable. And I'm a horror movie fan. Like, the last hour of that is just despicable filmmaking. I mean, just awfulness. But it made 117. And so there's an audience for this stuff. They're plugged in, and The Curse of La Llorona is going to ride this a little bit. And sort of that's another reason why it did so well. I mean, when you really think about it, it's a kind of a genius move on their part to take this urban legend that everybody in this community knows. Like, everybody who's Latino probably has some version of this story in their family that has been told. Take that really prominent myth that's going around, and then tap it into this, cinematic universe that is sort of just growing and growing. Is it anything like Marvel's? No, but it's kind of the horror version of that. And it's just like, it's a home run. And it's going to close it out like 50 something, but like for the production budget and for it's already done 50, it's already done 56 worldwide total. I think it's going to have a real strong foreign market. This is going to make money, and it's gonna sort of like prime. And this performance matched with the Nun's performance is going to prime Warner Brothers and New Line to sort of, let's keep expanding on this Conjuring universe. And I think it's going to work for a while. What do they have coming out? They have. Let's see. There is another Annabelle movie coming out, I think this year, isn't there? It's Patrick Wilson in it. He might be in it. Annabelle Comes Home is coming out in June. I believe Patrick Wilson's in that one. It's kind of like, it must be like a crossover completely with The Conjuring. So I think everything's going well. This is like another notch in their belt, I would say, for Warner Brothers and New Line and James Wan. I'm sure he's probably like executive producing this or something. But it's really that this whole world's probably, is mostly indebted to James Wan and sort of seeing the potential here in these types of movies and sort of hearkening back to the old haunted house movies, paranormal stuff that had not really been popular for about 20-ish years, maybe more than that. In any event, so that's a great performance for Curse of La Llorona. Let's dive into number 2 real quick. Shazam, 17.3 million, fantastic 29% drop. Still in over 4,000 theaters. Per theater average right now in its third weekend is $4,145. Total gross so far for Shazam is 121. Another Warner Brothers New Line movie. This is a really good performance, and the budget was kind of high, right? The budget was $100 million. Worldwide, though, it's sitting at 322. If let's do super quick math on that. 322 right now. That'll probably end up generating about $200 and let's say $80 million in revenue for them. And that's like every platform, digital TV and stuff down the line. This is just throwing this stuff out there. Its costs were $100 million, but like marketing and stuff, costs are usually about 2.75 to 3x the production budget, somewhere in that range, especially for a movie on this level. So it's already getting to the point where it's breaking even, and it's still got a long run to go. It's still probably got 4 or 5 weeks of a decent run going on. So this will be profitable, definitely, for Warner Brothers and New Line. And it's the DCEU has another character that they can tap into. You got Aquaman that's well established, you have Wonder Woman, and now you have Shazam as kind of maybe like a tier B Ant-Man type, but definitely has performed well enough so that they can keep him around and get him in the ensemble movie whenever they decided to take a leap on that again. But really great performance and drop for Shazam here in number 2. Number 3 was a new wide release, Breakthrough from Fox. This is a faith-based movie, which is, it's Easter weekend. Oh, I didn't really mention this. It's like the worst Easter weekend since 2005. This Deadline's claiming that. So it's been a really quiet weekend. And that makes sense because Avengers is coming out next weekend. And so it's like I always say, whenever there's the massive movie, it's like the beach and the water sort of going out to sea before a tsunami hits. It's essentially what's happening. But Breakthrough did okay, $11.1 million, opened in 2,800 theaters. Per theater average was not so great, $3,900 per theater. I mean, the overall performance on this, it's a faith-based movie. It's Easter. It did okay. It's hard to really figure out with these movies because I don't know the production budget on this. Maybe I can find it out real quick. It's not listed. I can't imagine it's that high though. Rotten Tomato score on Breakthrough was 64%. 5.6 out of 10 was the real score from critics. Not good. But not, I mean, it's just not good. It's not like horrific, but it's pretty bad. Audience score 77%. Cinema score A. With faith-based movies, like horror movies are automatically depressed in terms of their cinema score and audience scores. Faith-based movies are the exact opposite. Because people, like I talked about with Unplanned, people go to this movie to have their beliefs reaffirmed. And if their beliefs are reaffirmed in a decent story, they're going to give it an A. That's what they're looking for. And so high cinema score, a Letterboxd score, it doesn't really apply to this because this is not really a film snob, film aficionado movie. 2.9 out of 5. Not very good. Production budget was $14 million. So it's not the end of the world here. It's an okay performance. Post-track was 4.5 stars out of 5, which is good. 69% definite recommend. Again, faith-based audiences. They're very easy to please. Overall demographics here, 49% Caucasian, which is a little bit depressed than a normal audience, which is about 53. 28% Latino, higher than normal, right? 23%, usually 22%. This is at 28% Latino. African Americans was a little bit higher. They're usually 12%. Here they're 15%. Asian other was at 9%. This played super strong in the Midwest and South. The top 10 theaters were in that area. Missouri and Tennessee, the two last states I've lived in. Currently live in Missouri, used to live in Tennessee. 7 of the top 10 runs. All that information was from Deadline if you want to get more of it. So okay performance. I have a hard time judging if this is going to make money or not. Let's try and figure it out really quick. So if you got a $14 million production budget, what would the marketing be for something like this? I don't know, maybe like 25 million bucks, I would say. It's really hard to judge with lower budget movies because the normal rules just don't apply. Because the marketing budget here is going to be way more, probably significantly more than the production budget itself. I would say like total costs on this, God, I don't even know, $50-60 million. Let's just say 60, and that might be way off, but like let's just assume that it's gonna have to make what, it's got 60 million divided by, I don't know, like 85%. I don't know, maybe like $70 million to break even. So I don't think Breakthrough is going to break even. There's not really a foreign audience for this, I don't think. Yeah, this one, the closer I look at it, I think it might be a little bit of definitely a loss for Fox on this at the end of the day. So I don't necessarily agree with what Deadline was saying. That's going to be okay. I just don't see how they release something like this for under the $50-60 million mark worldwide. And then it's really going to have to make, 1.2x that in order to break even. I don't really see that happening. So I think they played the Easter card here and it just didn't work very well. I would have put this out probably last weekend and give it some time this week because a lot of people were off for spring break this week. So it would have been a good family movie to have out there. And I think they kind of blew it a bit, waiting a weekend to do it on actual Easter weekend. So that was Breakthrough. I'm calling it a little bit of a loss right now, but we'll see where it ends up. Could have really low drops too. It seems like it's decent counter programming to Avengers, but I'm not really sure. We'll see how it does next weekend. Captain Marvel. What the hell happened here? 9.1 million, a 5, almost 6% increase from last weekend. This is amazing. Like, MCU just like constantly fucking blows my mind. Per theater average was $3,400 in its seventh freaking weekend. It also just passed $400 million. Like, what the freaking hell is going on with this thing? It also costs, it's past $1 billion now worldwide. It's at $1,090,000,000, with like a take of $690 million internationally. It's a huge win. This will be in the top 10 most profitable movies next year easily. If I do, what's the production budget on something like this? I don't freaking know. Maybe like they probably capped it at like 150. Total costs are probably like $500 million. It's gonna like take in so much money. Even at where it's at right now, I would say it's probably gonna take in $850 million in revenue. You're looking at like $250,000. No, you're looking at $350 million in profit just to start right now. So I think that's definitely going to be in the top 5 most profitable movies next year. An amazing performance overall. Really great 7th weekend performance with a bump here in the Easter weekend. And another win. And I think a lot of it too has to do with the hype now coming up for Avengers. People they're so hyped to go see this new Avengers movie. It's going to be so massive. They're just like, I need something. So Captain Marvel's there. So I think some people were questioning, why are you putting this out right before Avengers? It's going to depress the performance. I don't think that happened. I think the exact opposite happened here. So awesome deal for Captain Marvel. Let's see. Number 5 was Little, 8.4 million. Do I know this movie? Oh yeah, this is the one I always keep forgetting. PG-13 comedy from Universal. Regina Hall is Ray. Director Tina Gordon Chisholm. An okay performance here for Little. 8.4 this weekend, 45% drop, which is a pretty good drop. I think that's definitely partly due to the Easter weekend. I think it's a good Easter movie. To go see. Per theater average was $3,100. Total take so far is $29 million. Does not feel like it's going to have a big international audience for this, and it doesn't. It's only made $34 million worldwide. Production budget was 20, so this is definitely right now in the lost territory for Universal. It's doing okay here, but it needs to do really well domestically to make money. I don't see that happening right now, and doesn't really seem like it's gonna have long legs either. This weekend was an okay drop, but I don't know, next week with Avengers, it's hard to tell what's gonna happen just because every screen's gonna be taken up by Avengers. So an okay performance, but I think not really what they were looking for, and definitely maybe more of an underperformance that I'm letting on. Might be a little bit of a loss for that movie, but it could make it up VOD, could make it up on a streaming deal, TV deal. There's always a possibility to make some more back-end money, but that the box office is not doing so hot. So that was number 5. Number 6 was Dumbo, 6.8 million, 27% drop. That's a great drop. Finally has a good drop. Remember it had that second weekend had a horror movie drop that was so bad. Lost 480 theaters. It might be way too late for this though. Total take so far for Dumbo is $101 million in its 4th weekend. Per theater average $2,100. That's bad for a movie like this. I think overall the story on Dumbo is that it's going to be a loss for Disney. And it depends, like worldwide and stuff. Let's see how it's doing all over the world. You're probably looking at $100 million loss. It's going to be pretty big. Oh wow, it's only doing 307 worldwide. This probably had a similar production budget to Captain Marvel, just to sort of compare. So if it's at 307 and Captain Marvel's at $1 billion, you can tell that like this is probably not going to make anybody any money, and it's going to be a pretty big loss for Disney. Not that surprising. I think Tim Burton's kind of run his course with the Disney stuff. I hope he goes back to like more crazy stuff like Edward Scissorhands and whatever that. He has such a interesting, wonderful vision, artistic vision. I think he's just sort of. It's too rote for him to be at Disney doing Dumbo movies. Like, it just does not work. Audiences don't like it. It's weird. Bill Burr was talking about this, I think, with Conan. He took his daughter to go see it, thinking it was like, oh, it's Dumbo. It's like a family movie. And like they lasted like 10 minutes because it's Tim Burton. It's weird. It's macabre. Like, it just doesn't. I don't know why Disney think that combination works. Like, it worked with Alice in Wonderland, But that's because you had Johnny Depp and you had this like, and I also Wonder Woman's pretty freaking trippy and weird, anyways. So I think it worked well there, but it does not work for something that's like Dumbo, which I think is a little bit more of a traditional family movie. I mean, at least it was. Okay, so that was number 6, Dumbo, 6.8 million. Number 7, Pet Sematary, in its third weekend did 4.8 million, a 50% drop, which is okay. Starting to lose their theaters, lost 400 theaters, still in 3,100 theaters. Per theater average, not great at all, $1,500 per theater. $49 million take so far for Pet Sematary. Not horrifically bad, pun intended. Production budget was 21. It's like a push. It's like you might as well have not have released it because it's not really going to make a ton of money. It's probably not going to lose a ton of money. And so, yeah, I think it's not a fantastic performance here for Pet Sematary, which was surprising to me because I felt like it was going to be strong. It just didn't happen here. And I think a lot of that had to do with, you had everything going for it, right? Because Stephen King with it, like Stephen King is just like the author, right? Horror movie author, always has been, but now he's had like his third wave of popularity now, or like fifth wave or something. So it had that going for it. The marketing was really slick, but I hear the movie's trash. I mean, I hear it's just awful, and especially like the last hour or something. So I think this is just sort of dealing with poor quality problems, and this is going to happen. I've been talking about this since it did so well. Studios are going to dump money into tons of different horror movies, especially because they're usually so cheap to produce. And if the writing's not there, the acting's not there, the directing, the editing, then like this is what's going to happen. These movies are going to start failing. And then all of a sudden the faucet's going to stop for horror movies again. But I think we're still got a good year or two of a glut of horror movies, which I'm excited about because I love them. Even if they're terrible, I love them. Okay, so that was number 7. Number 8 was Missing Link. 4.3 million, great 26% drop. Total take is about $13 million so far. This is, one of those movies that I didn't know a lot about because they didn't really have probably a traditional marketing campaign. It's from Leica movies. They did the Kubo and the Two Strings, Box Trolls. They did Corpse Bride back in the day, Paranorman, and Caroline. So a really interesting movie studio. And I get the feeling, I think the guy that runs it is pretty rich or something. He must be. I think he is. And I think what's happening here is kind of like a not vanity, I shouldn't say that. It's kind of like a work of passion and love that he's releasing these movies. They're not necessarily made to make a ton of money. I'm sure they would like if they did, but this is just not one of those wide releases that was ever going to make a lot of cash because because it's coming from, and it's also from United Artists releasing, which is like, isn't that super old? Isn't that like from like the early 90s and 80s? Maybe it's coming back. I don't know. This is not a movie where I'm sure it's a good movie, but like they didn't put a marketing campaign out that made any sense. There wasn't probably a PR campaign. They just don't, for whatever reason, they don't play that part of the game. That's why it's only made $13 million so far. Okay, so that was 8. Number 9 was Us. 4.2 million, a 37% drop. That's a great drop. It's lost 500 theaters, so it's kind of on its downward swing here. Still in 2,200 theaters overall. Per theater average is an okay $1,800 in its 5th weekend. And this is what I was talking about before. Like the $100 million mark was the paradigm of success for horror movies so much as like 5 years ago, or as soon as 5 years ago, or as recent as 5 years ago, I should say. And now, this movie, Us, has done 170. And like it hasn't like, and that's like a really good performance, but people aren't like, oh, this is like blown away by its performance. The horror movie game has just changed. It's changed completely. And so 170 would have been like, one of the top 5 horror movies ever. Now it's like a top 10 horror movie or top 20 horror movie. So which is cool to see. And I think it's kind of like people are sleeping on this performance a little bit. 170 is amazing for a movie like that, especially with a $20 million production budget. And so it's continuing to do strong here in its 5th weekend. Number 10 was Hellboy. 3.8 million, a 67% drop. Oh my God. See, this is what I'm talking about, like a horror movie drop. When we say that, it's usually like 60 to like 70%. If you get higher in the 60s, that's like a pretty rare, terrible drop. Didn't lose any theaters because I think they're contractually obligated to play it 2 weeks. But this one is a $19 million so far, $50 million production budget. This is going to be written off. You're probably talking 50, 60, $100 million loss on this. That's just the way it goes. It's like, if you get the thing right, you could be, if you play your cards right and take the bet and do like a Captain Marvel, you can make $350 million in a profit. If you take the bet and don't do it well, like Hellboy, you put a lot of money behind it and throw it out there, it's going to lose like $50 million. So it's a business of big swings, essentially, which is why I find it so fascinating. Okay, so that's the top 10. What's the story in the top 10? Let's like wrap that part up. Curse of La Llorona with an extremely strong performance. I can't emphasize that enough. $26 million for something like that is really good. Driven mostly by Latinos, because that's the La Llorona myth is super common in those communities, so they all know it. Breakthrough did okay, but probably not going to make any money. Probably a little bit of a loss. Shazam doing quite well. Captain Marvel, amazing. And the rest kind of outside of us not doing all that hot. Outside the top 10, you had Penguins. This one's not doing so well. So it opened in over 1,800 theaters. Per theater average was terrible. $1,200 per theater? Am I like reading this wrong? Like, is this just like I felt like nature documentaries, number one, opened a lot smaller than this, and number two, would have like a per theater average like $4,000 or $5,000 easy. Like, these are like softballs. Like, why is this not doing so hot? I'm not sure. And so Penguins is not doing well. What else came out? Little Woods from Neon, one of my favorite little companies. I don't know this. Tessa Thompson's in it. Lily James. I don't know anything about this one. No, neither does anybody else. It opened up in 33 theaters. Per theater average $2,000. A great 66K weekend here for Little Woods. Another kind of one that's interesting is Under Silver Lake from A24. This is a strange movie where like it's from the director of It Follows, and there was a lot of hype obviously behind him because of his first movie. I mean, It Follows to me is like one of the best horror films of like the last 30 years. Like, to me, it's already like this classic film. Under the Silver Lake is has been seen as like a complete and utter mess. People have related it a lot to like Richard Kelly's Donnie Darko was a masterpiece, and his follow-up was Southland Tales, which is considered an absolute shit show. I think this is a very similar situation. It's weird though, because A24, because it's such a polarizing film, I mean, it really is. Like, if you go on like film Twitter, it's like some people like love it, some people absolutely hate it. There's no in between. You would think A24 would capitalize that on a little bit more and just like push it and say, yeah, like, you got to see it. It's crazy. This is a crazy movie. Come out and see it. But they've kind of buried it, and I feel like this is a really poor choice for them. It came out in the United States. It came out in the UK last year, I feel like. It's just coming out this weekend in the US. It did okay in New York, Los Angeles. It's probably playing in the Angelica and ArcLight. Yeah, that's literally where it's playing. The Angelica in New York and the ArcLight in Los Angeles. So 2 theater opening, did $20K per theater. I'd go see it in the theater, absolutely. Just for the experience. But yeah, I think A24 just like buried it because they kind of, maybe they felt like embarrassed by it, like how it was being received. It seems like a very pretentious, over-the-top noir, maybe sort of David Lynchian type film that just doesn't connect with certain people and certain critics, and they loathe it. Like Mark Kermode on the BBC just like ripped it to shreds. It's a great review to listen to. But like it's like kind of like what's the P.T. Barnum, indie press is good press, or whoever said that. So like even the negative press, I feel it could have driven out more of an audience. I've been dying to see this movie. I would rent it immediately right now on VOD. It won't be on VOD. They're going to dump it on 4/22 this week. It's like, you choose one or the other. Like, don't put it out in theaters and then just dump it on VOD the next day. Like, do a huge VOD release and just be like, hey, this is going to be on VOD. It's, $4 to rent. Every film nerd in the United States will probably spend $4 to see this movie. Which is more than they're going to get from like opening in the Angelica and ArcLight, and that's it. So a really bizarre film. Can't wait to see it, but obviously not performing very well at the box office. Okay, so that's the top 10. A little bit of stuff. Anything outside the top 10 else I got to hit? Amazing Grace from Neon. I don't know what this is. Oh, the Aretha Franklin doc. That's doing okay. Did about 600K this weekend. Per theater average is $3,147 to be exact. It's made $1.3 million so far. That's not too bad for that. Docs have been doing really well. Anything else? God, there's like nothing. 5 Feet Apart sitting at $45 million. Wonder Park sitting at 44. Glory Bell sitting at 5. How to Train Your Dragon was at 14, sitting at 159. Again, supposed to be the last movie of the series. I feel like Universal's going to bring it back in like 4 or 5 years. And that's it so far. That's pretty much the top 10, top 20, and the rest. Let's talk briefly about Avengers Endgame coming out next week. So this is probably going to be the biggest opening weekend of all time domestically. I think it's going to beat Force Awakens, and I think it's going to beat obviously Avengers Infinity War. And so if we kind of just like where do we think it's going to end up in terms of its final opening weekend numbers, just to throw out a guess, and just as like a reminder. Avengers Infinity War did 257, which is the current record holder. Force Awakens did 247. Last Jedi did 220. Jurassic World did 208. And Avengers did 207. Black Panther did 202. Those are all the movies that have opened over 200. I'd say like the basement for this is probably that 240 to 250. I don't think it's going to go that low. Like, unless something changes or like people hate it, I just don't see that happening. The basement's probably really like 250. It is opening on 4,400 theaters. I don't know how accurate that number is, but that really is going to be the determining factor in how well it's going to do at the end of the day. Because if you look at the 1 and 2 all-time opening weekends, Infinity War and Force Awakens, you'll notice something. Infinity War did 257. Force Awakens did 247. But the per theater averages are pretty different. And you'd be surprised, The Force Awakens had a higher per theater average at 59, basically 60K per theater, whereas Infinity War only had a $57,000 per theater average. But Avengers is on so many more theaters, 300 more theaters, that makes up that $10 million difference in the opening weekend. So the question is, how many theaters is this going to open on? It looks like it's going to be about 4,400, pretty similar to the Infinity War opening. Now, my guess right now is it can match the Force Awakens per theater average of 60K, which is outrageous and amazing and unprecedented, whatever. But I think it could do it because just all the chatter that I'm hearing that everybody has to see this movie. It's like the biggest movie ever. It's the last Avengers movie for a lot of, part of this whole series. So if it does open on 4,400 theaters are in, and you're looking at a 60K per theater average, you're looking at 264. I think it's a really good guess right now. That's going to do 264, and then probably close out over $700 million domestically, and probably $2.2 billion worldwide would be a decent guess right now, which is kind of outrageous, right? Now, what are the other scenarios? The other scenarios are like maybe, because every single time another MCU movie comes out, it kind of feels like there's a dwindling amount of people who are all familiar with all of them. Maybe that plays a factor and it can't push it because it's the last one. It's like maybe people feel like they need to see Infinity War and they haven't seen it yet, so they don't want to see this one. That could be a factor, but I don't think it's going to be a major factor. So I don't see why it wouldn't break the Infinity War record. I think people are more hyped for this one than that one. So I think 264 is really realistic. Can it go much higher than that? There is a possibility. Like, we always sort of like cap things out. I guessed Force Awakens within about, I want to say like $2 million. I was off on that. And that's because I used per theater averages and said, like, what's like the theoretical cap here on what you can make per theater? And that was, the top movie before then was 208 with Jurassic World. So I was kind of like guessing out in the middle of nowhere. There was no sort of past data besides per theater average that I could go on to guess Force Awakens. And I think it's kind of we're in a similar situation here. We're in also like unprecedented territory, like unknown territory. And people are like thinking, can it do $300 million? I just don't. When The Force Awakens came out, I do feel like that's close to the theoretical cap of what it can do per theater. Just because they're, per theater average means theaters. It doesn't mean screens, right? So you can have more screens, tons of screens at a single theater that pushes up its per theater average, right? I feel like with Force Awakens, they were basically running that movie 24/7 opening weekend. Like there were sold out shows at probably 2 a.m. in New York City, 3 a.m. in New York City, 4 a.m. I feel like Endgame is in a similar situation where I'm seeing that, like 3 a.m. IMAX playing at Lincoln Center or something like that. So I think it's going to be close to that Force Awakens cap. Does it break through it? It might break through it. And if it does, let's say it somehow does 62,000 per theater. What are we looking at then? You're looking at 272. I feel like the cap here, I think it's going to be 260 to 270. I'm going to say 264. But I do think there's a possibility it could push up into 270 opening weekend, which would just be bizarre. It's exciting stuff, and like I'm gonna try and follow it as much as I can, and might do a preview show and give you a more nuanced guess as to what it's gonna do, and see how close I can get. But it's exciting times. Like this is gonna be the biggest movie essentially ever, at least opening weekend. Now in the long run, it's not gonna be like $1 billion movie domestically, I don't think. Just because it's just like, it's one of those films, it's a sequel to a sequel to a sequel. Those tend to like pop off but have lower legs than the original movies, so I think that's going to happen here. But I think it's probably going to end up, it's got to be the number one movie of the year, right? Like nothing else could beat this. $700 million? Yeah, I don't think so. We don't have like Black Panther 2 coming out, so no. Okay, so that's next weekend, and then we're into May. There's El Chicano is coming out, The Intruder, Long Shot, I don't really get what's going on with that movie. Seen the marketing and stuff. It's like, I don't know, Seth Rogen, Charlize Theron. I don't think it's going to do very well. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's Lionsgate, so it probably will be terrible. Detective Pikachu coming out on May 10th. The Hustle on May 10th. What is that about? I don't know that one. And Palms coming out on May 10th. The Hustle is Rebel Wilson and Anne Hathaway. Looks kind of interesting. Palms is, I don't know, about, it's from SDX, so it's not going to do well. Although I shouldn't say that anymore after the, whatever that movie was. The Upside? Is that what it was? SDX's first hit in like 2 years. That's May 10th. May 17th, A Dog's Journey, John Wick 3. Son is also a star. Interested to see how John Wick 3 does, because that's kind of an interesting series that wasn't intended to be a series. I think they just did the first one and did so well and people loved it, that it's just the second one did even better. And then we're really into the summer season with Aladdin coming out. No idea what that's going to do at all. And then Godzilla King of Monsters to close out May. Yeah, it should be a fun May. It kind of feels a little bit like a throwback to the 90s this year. A lot of action movies, a lot of crazy shit going on. Because we got like the comic book movie stuff kind of out of the way earlier on. So it's going to be a little bit more traditional summer releases coming out. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wild Line Podcast. I will be back next weekend to talk about Avengers. I hope you will listen. Take care.